Welcome into the Awesemo MMA live before lock shows. We get you ready for UFC 268, which starts 90 minutes from now. We'll be here for the next 60 minutes, breaking this one down for you, answering your questions and comments. Of course, we are sponsored by PrizePicks. Later on the show, we'll talk about PrizePicks and some of the plays that I have seen over there as I was doing my research here for today's show. Of course, as always, I am joined by the fighter, Pete Raj Jr. Always great to be here on a Saturday afternoon talking about the fights with you. Of course, we did the strategy show on Thursday, and I want to present two comments that we got on YouTube. And one was in relation to Ian Gary. Another one is in relation into a single core lineup. And I want to mention this comment from Matt. He says, if Ian Gary was under 9,000 on DraftKings, he might be my highest owned fighter, but at 95, wow, I just don't think so. Gary's an impressive guy for sure. Just 3 years a game, goes on and so forth. Basically saying, noting at that price point, can he become optimal, getting you 100 plus points, or could a win maybe more in the 85, 95 range. So let's just start there. The guy who, to me, is the most interesting prospect on this card making his UFC debut, Ian Gary, 9,500. I'm trying to get him into my lineups, but I think Matt does bring up a very solid point. UFC debut, we all know UFC jitters are real. Can he pay off that price point?
Yeah, it's a great point. What's up, everybody? I do think that Ian Gary, at his price point, I'm okay with getting to him because I like to view that pay up option where people get scared off of the top salary fighter, and if he goes out there and has the performance that I'm expecting, I feel like he will end up being a part of the optimal lineup. I think he has multiple paths to victory in this fight. And if you kind of think back to last week and the week before, I brought it up on the strategy show. It's pretty similar to Khamzat Chimaev and Mason Jones the week before, where they are so priced up where people get a little scared, but it's business as usual. And they go out there and they have a dominant performance. Obviously, octagon jitters. I can see the hesitation with this pick, but I really like him. I like his prospect in the sport. I think that he can mix takedowns together, good ground and pound, probably has the thing is, right? Jordan Williams lost to Mickey Gall, and I view Ian Gary a much higher caliber fighter than Mickey Gall. So I just expect Ian Gary to go out there and do whatever he wants. The other prospect on this card that I'm extremely interested in and probably have a little bit more interest in is Alex Pereira. Man, you got talk about a guy who has 2 victories over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing, and that left hook of his is absolute dynamite. So I think that is a showcase fight. The UFC wants him to win, obviously, against Andreas Michailidis. You have to worry about him getting taken down, but definitely some awesome studs to pay up for.
Yeah, and the other question came in from Sam about single entry core plays, and there are a couple of fighters that immediately jump off to me. I look at Kamaru Usman. I mean, look, Kamaru Usman is a DraftKings FanDuel stud. I mean, we both know when this guy goes out there, he just puts on a ton of points. Look, I do think the main event is much closer than the DFS and betting odds indicate. You mentioned about Alex Pereira. He's another one that is a core play for me. Ian Gary is a core play for me. And I would tell you this, I think Rose Namajunas is becoming more and more a core play for me.
The salary makes that fight super, super interesting. You would like to think that the champ goes out there and replicates the same performance. I will tell you, if I fell on Rose or if I fell on Weili Zhang as kind of like my last piece of my lineup, I didn't hate either because I know that Weili Zhang can bring a high volume offense to Rose Namajunas. And if Rose, for whatever reason, isn't the sniper that we know she is, and she kind of gets out volumed, there is a path for Weili Zhang and maybe even with some takedowns. But I do favor Rose Namajunas in the matchup. I think that, she has an edge over Weili Zhang, who really just blitzes forward. And if you can be the matador to the bull on the outside, you can really just pick apart that person who's just blitzing recklessly forward. So I'm going to say that I'm okay with getting to either one of them. It's a lean towards Rose Namajunas, but I do have some lineups where Weili Zhang just fit, and I was like, okay, it's good value for both of them.
And I would tell you that the betting lines on Rose and Weili has really surprised me. Rose is still at plus money, which is a very
Right.
interesting. I would have thought that line would have flip-flopped this week, but I mean, look, Pete, if you want to go a little bit of a narrative, last night was a good night for Fight Ready over in Dublin. Patricky Pitbull becoming the Bellator
Yeah.
lightweight champion. Of course, he's been in the room with Wei Lee there at Fight Ready. Of course, his brother Patricio's been in the room. Henry Cejudo's been in that room. Davison Figueiredo's been in that room. But I mean, look, Wei Lee is not a grappler. She is a striker.
Right.
I mean, and look, there's not a ton that we could take out of their first fight because it only lasts 78 seconds. But we talked about on Thursday, this is a fight that we have to prioritize because of salary on DraftKings. FanDuel, I think, is a little different scenario here because you're talking about $18 for Wei Lee, $17 for Rose. When I was developing my FanDuel lineups, I was looking at that fight, but then I started looking at some other options I might want to get to. I'll tell you, the guy on FanDuel I found myself getting to as a punt play,
Who?
Frankie Edgar.
Hey.
I know it's tough to trust a 4-year-old bantamweight, but his path to victory to me is very clear. It's taking down Marlon Vera. And the one thing about Cheeto is Cheeto does get off the slow starts.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. I'm really not in the Frankie Edgar business today, and if everybody else is, that's okay with me. I feel like that fight's going to go the distance, and he could rack up some points with some takedowns, but I think he's going to have to be very, very careful, and he could be a little bit more careful in this matchup because he just got chin checked and knocked out. So you could see him hesitate a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's tough to say, right? We don't know how he's going to react to getting knocked out viciously like that in his return fight, but the value is definitely there. So I agree with you in the sense that the value is incredible. To kind of like circle back and go back to that Rose Namajunas Zhang Wei Li fight, it wasn't too long ago that Rose Namajunas lost a decision to Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And I know like MMA math doesn't make sense, but when that fight's on the feet and you have a person who just throws reckless volume, sometimes aggressiveness moves the needle for the judges. And that's all I'm saying with the value for Weili Zhang. So whoever gets in my lineup at that point, I view them basically the same as I view the Justin Gaethje Michael Chandler fight. I'm happy to get to either one of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I think we really labeled out the Gaethje and Chandler fight. To me, the reason I really love Justin Gaethje in that fight is because of the leg kicks. It's not just going back and looking at what Michael Chandler has done here in a short stint in the UFC. You go back to the Bellator fights. This is a guy who just would not check leg kicks, and we know how much of a huge part of the game that is for Justin Gaethje. So we'll talk about that. Of course, appreciate everyone here on a Saturday afternoon watching. Of course, really would appreciate. Smash that like button right here on YouTube. We appreciate it. Subscribe to Awesemo. We got a ton of great shows for you each and every day. Of course, coming up after us is NBA Deeper Dive. They'll get you ready for tonight's NBA action. Of course, following them, we'll be live before lockdown. If you're not an Awesemo Plus member, you want to get a peek of what's behind the paywall, today's free premium day in tools, Week 9 NFL ownership projections, NBA player projections, NHL top stacks, and UFC pro plays. And I'll say also, when you're over at awesemo.com, you're going to want to check out that player props. I was texting Pete about this last night. Just saying, want to make some money. Just saying, you got to peek over those player props because for some of us, that treats us very well. But Pete, we got a ton of questions that we want to get into. Do want to answer a question that came in a little before the show. Brenton asking us about a DraftKings question. Usman and Colby Covington or Colby and Ian Gary?
Oh man. I mean, you could do a fight stack. I mean, that does make some sense. It just needs to reach to the later rounds, and you can't have Usman finish him early. I do think the first fight was extremely close, as evidenced by the 3-1 judges total for Colby Covington, the 3-1 towards Usman, and the 2-2 for the third judge going into the fifth. So like it was exceptionally close. Usman does seem to get out volumed in somewhat, phased with punches at times and kind of staggered. I do think that was some time ago, and we see a better Kamaru Usman. He's looked extremely dominant, and I know Colby Covington, if you kind of look back on his performance against Tyron Woodley was a shell of himself, but he looked absolutely incredible. Yes, Tyron has good power, so it's tough to really gauge where Colby's at with his new camp and everything, but I would expect Kamaru Usman to go out there and put a stamp on this rivalry. I'm leaning in his direction. I'm picking him, but I understand the value. So with all that being said, I guess I would have to lean the fight stack, but there are some some really, really cheap underdogs that are going, underrepresented that we'll get to as the show goes on, that I feel like you could actually have a little bit better value with.
Let's mention a couple other questions that come in from our subscribers. First up, Anthony asking best value plays over on DraftKings. I mean, look, Chris Curtis to me is, I would label him a punt play. I can label out both sides of now. The concern you're going to have with Chris Curtis is an early blitz from Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes gets him out of the first round. But you look at Chris Curtis throughout his career, this is a guy who comes on strong second, third, fourth, fifth round. Obviously, this is only a 30-round fight. You look at, I don't think you can ignore Frankie Edgar, because Frankie's path to me is very clear. It's going out there and getting the takedown against him. I think, look, I know Billy Quarantillo is going to be a popular play today, Pete, but if you're Shane Burgos, he's got to keep the fight on the feet. If Billy is going to be optimal, it's because Billy won and Billy scored a ton of takedowns. Like, we always joke about, hey, who's going down to Takedown City? This is not one of those fight cards that I think we have, one or two that you sit there and say, oh, this fighter could potentially score 3, 4, 5 takedowns.
Yeah. My friend hit me up and he's like, I feel like this card is so much better for watching than it is for betting. And I would probably agree with that, because there are some volatile matchups. And the more you really sit and you think about these matchups, you can definitely see the underdog coming through. The more I sit there and I really, really think about these fights, I'm like, man, if I'm making a parlay, you're going to have a lot of people busting that parlay, because somebody could get out volumed or outworked, via decision. So, there's not too many people on there with spectacular takedown upside. The Zhang Wei Li is a little interesting, but I don't really think that she's the better overall grappler. I think Michael Chandler, to be honest, is going criminally underowned, given his success over in Bellator and given his path to victory. He could hit and stagger Justin Gaethje just as easy as Justin Gaethje can hit and stagger him. I'm still favoring Justin Gaethje in the matchup because the leg kicks, the power, the UFC resume, all of that. But if you really go back and you look at that Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, it's tough to really hold that same level and think like, oh, he looked terrible, grappling defensively. Yeah, he did look pretty bad in that. And Michael Chandler, if you go back to a lot of his Bellator fights, when he wants a takedown, he gets a takedown, and he's exceptionally strong on top. You even saw that in the Charles Oliveira fight. So Michael Chandler could be everybody's little darling that's going a little underrepresented.
The one fight that I was putting together my spreadsheet today, and I was, pulling up our ownership projections on DraftKings and FanDuel, and I'm looking at fights that I was saying, okay, what's that under the radar fight that could go optimal? And you don't feel good on either one of these guys, Pete. But I just wonder, John Vante has one foot out the door. He's retiring after this one. Doesn't look great on the scale. Chris Barnett is a guy that I've known. I've seen fight for years. He used to fight here in the regional scene in Tampa. He's fought all over the world. And I look at what we're seeing ownership wise in terms of that fight. You look at the price aspect of that, especially on DraftKings, 7,900 for Volante, 8,300 for Chris Barnett. Like, it wouldn't shock me if the winner of that matchup ends up being optimal, because it's a first round stoppage, and because it's heavyweight MMA, usually it's a first round stoppage or a sloppy 3-round fight. I mean, let's just be honest about it. That's more case than not. That's what it's going to be. It's like, that's the one fight that I don't want to get to, but I'm like, man, I could see one of those guys end up being optimal.
I could see it as well. That weight class is usually a part of the optimal. More likely than not. I mean, it could be a sloppy heavyweight affair, and that's basically what I'm predicting. I could be wrong on that, but John Volante looks terrible. It looks like he's really just stopped caring about training. And his opponent Barnett just doesn't look good as well, but I feel like he's always looked like that. We've seen John Volante have a negative transformation. So that's why I'm kind of off the John Volante train. I think that he could easily stop Barnett, because you see he's been stopped multiple times from strikes. Jean Volante has as well, but for the most part, Jean Volante just gets outworked. His cardio is a liability. He got submitted off of, when he was on top from basically a non-existent position, but that's besides the point. I'm kind of like underweight to that fight, but I get it. There was a lot of times I was creating lineups and I was ending on Jean Volante, and I'm like, damn it, I don't want him in my lineup. I really don't. So yeah, I'm a little underweight to that fight, and if it comes through and it ends up being around 1 or round 2, I probably won't be cashing the best, but it's okay to make a stand.
Next up, Brent Askey says, you both have prayer high on your exposure list, Gary and Gaethje. do you have for DFS a fourth? I know that Pete is hot on Curtis. Is he the fourth as a true underdog?
Yeah, well, Curtis is an absolute dart throw, and it's an underdog that I think could come through. But our friend Hunter in chat definitely brought up a good point where I'm thinking about that fight, and the volatility of Phil Hawes' cardio is what really points me in Chris Curtis's direction. And also, Chris Curtis is a phenomenal striker, and he actually has good takedown defense as well. So I think that he's somewhat of a nightmare of a matchup against Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes is definitely the bigger and probably stronger athlete. Phil Hawes could easily knock out Chris Curtis. We've seen Ray Cooper do that to Curtis, but for the most part, I think Curtis will be able to dictate the pace in the striking realm. This could end up going the distance. So it's an underdog that could possibly come through with a round 2 or round 3 KO for us. And at that price, he will be optimal. But I do have a fear that Hawes just is able to do enough. If you look back on that Imavov fight, Imavov's extremely dangerous as well. I think Imavov's equally as dangerous as Chris Curtis, and he was able to survive that. I don't know how he did, but that's kind of like my one hesitation with it. So there are a couple lineups, well, more than a couple lineups where I didn't include Chris Curtis because of that fear. But for the most part, I think that Chris Curtis is probably the best underdog on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, whether we're talking about DraftKings or over on FanDuel, he comes in and wins. It's going to be hard for him not to be optimal because that price point is just going to allow you to get to so many other fighters that you want to have in your lineup. Of course, before I get to CS and his super chat, do want to let you know about the promo we got going on during this show. We use the promo code MMA Live before lock, all caps one word, MMA Live before lock. And if you're a new user of Also Plus Platinum, you'll get 25% off when you use that promo code your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Of course, if you're just looking for an also MMA weekly pass, you can get that package for only $8.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Got a ton of great tools behind the paywall. That top fighter tool, which you want to look at that top 6 percentage, chance to go over 100 points as well. Great promo we got going on over there. If you're a new user of Also Plus Platinum, be sure to use that promo code MMA Live before lock for 25% off your first week. CS, appreciate you in the super chat. He goes, two things always: too cheap GPP flyers, also in a smaller field or in cash. Is there a merit to stacking either main event?
I'm not stacking today. And the reason I'm not is I think that there's some plenty of underdogs that could definitely come through. If I had to point to two underdogs that I probably are okay with getting a little bit more than the field, I spoke of them already. It's Chandler and Curtis. They're both like under 20%, under 15%. I think that's criminally low given their upside, especially the caliber. You talk about two former champs outside the UFC. So there's a third. We'll get to him at just about 15 minutes before the show ends. But those are two guys that I really like.
Mentioned over on our Discord, Richie talking about how he's a fan of Michael Chandler. Mentioned that he's a casual fan, and mentioned about potentially making a bet on Michael Chandler. If I was going to make a bet on Chandler, I'm looking at two things. I'm looking at the prop bet of Chandler to win via TKO, a KO, which is plus 450. I believe it's around 7-1 odds for him to win in round one. If you're looking to bet Michael Chandler, those are where I'd be looking to bet at.
I think that there's a grappling path to victory as well. I really do. I think that the ego of Michael Chandler, like you mentioned on the strategy show, could avoid that outcome from happening, engaging in a firefight. But if you think about it, Chandler just took a ton of damage in that Charles Oliveira fight, and now he's rebounding against one of the most dangerous strikers there is, a guy who on short notice absolutely pieced up, Tony Ferguson. So I think the coaches and everybody at Sanford MMA say, hey, Chandler, let's wrestle this guy, especially early, because we've seen Gaethje fatigue. We've seen Gaethje wobble. We've seen him have, he's on skates multiple times in fights where he's actually rocked. But I know that he hasn't really been finished on the feet like he probably should have multiple times. But I think, just mixing it up for Chandler could work well in this matchup.
Next up, before I get into the YouTube question, says, are we overlooking the Shabazi Imavov fight? Both not highly owned and decent inside the distance odds. That is one fight I found myself as I was hand building lineups going, okay, I've got room for both of these guys. I do think that this is a much better stylistic fight for Eben Shabazian than his previous two fights. But still a lot of questions out there. But when I'm looking at our 8,000, Eben Shabazian is one of the fighters I was targeting.
Oh, I mean, I had such high hopes for Shabazian, and I don't think that Imavov is an easy matchup, but I do think the stylistic matchup makes a lot more sense for Shabazian to showcase his skills, right? Like, it's not an easy fight. Imavov is really, really good, but he's not facing a grappler, which I think is a plus, because if Shabazian is able to not face a grappler, he's able to let his hands and legs go. But guess what? We've seen Shabazian change levels and shoot takedowns as well. I mean, he scored 8 in his UFC debut, which is kind of wild to me. But yeah, man, I don't know about that fight. I feel like they're both so good that it couldn't negate each other. I don't really know if either one of them are going to knock each other out. It's definitely where I would be more inclined to go the Imavov route than the Shabazian route, but I don't blame you if you want to take a shot in the underdog.
FanDuel question here: Rose Namajunas or O'Day Osborne? I'd rather go the Rose Namajunas route just because I got 5 rounds to work with. O'Day Osborne, of course, it was 2 months ago that he was knocked out. His opponent did miss weight.
Yeah.
I saw on Facebook he kind of gave the emoji of my opponent missed weight, but fight's still on.
Yeah, so I think O'Day Osborne's another guy that could be going, massively overlooked. And I don't know if like people are just desperate for underdogs. That's kind of like how we all are, right? We're always desperate to find underdogs that could come through for us. So CJ Vergara is a guy where you see his excellent performance on the Contender Series, where he looks good. He throws nice knees up the middle, good striking, good overall. But I think we forget how big O'Day Osborne is for the weight class. Like, he's 5'7", right? But he has a 73-inch reach, and he's a southpaw. Southpaws traditionally give a ton of fighters issues. And if you haven't fought lefties a lot, it's very, very tricky. You have to do everything different. So you can't move to the right because you're going to move into the left hand. And O'Day Osborne really fights long. He extends his arms. So I worry about him coming back so soon from a KO loss. But O'Day Osborne also has some sneaky jiu-jitsu. And if you go back and you look at Vergara's, from amateur to pro, you can see that he has a submission defeat. So I think that there's a sneaky path for that. But O'Day Osborne's a guy that's in that high 8,000 range on DraftKings that I think could end up having a nice breakout performance. We'll have to see, but I'm okay with getting to O'Day Osborne.
Next up, we got Rose and Wei Lee and Usman Covington. Can't choose between who to take as a underdog play. I mean, look, it's, I do think that people are underestimating Colby Covington. Now, look, a lot of that goes into what we have seen from Kamaru Usman over his past couple of trips inside the octagon since he did take on Colby Covington. And we've only seen Colby Covington once. I do think the fight's a little closer. If you told me where do I want to go underdog-wise, the thing is, man, you can save a lot of money going the Colby Covington route. I think both these fights are going to play on the feet, so I really don't think we're going to have takedowns in this one. I'd probably still say I'd rather go Wei Lee over Covington as an underdog spot, but man, Covington at 6,900 on DraftKings, $15 on FanDuel. There's a lot of value there.
Yeah, I feel like it's close to a coin flip. But I will lean in the Weili Zhang. Traditionally, women's MMA, the finishes are a little less, what should I say, likely. They do happen. I just feel like, it'll kind of recede to the norm a little bit. And that's where we could see Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang go into the later rounds and have a later finish, or it end up going the distance. I know the first fight between Colby and Kamaru Usman was really close. And a lot of people are thinking that the same's going to happen. I could actually see it not being close. You know what I mean? Just given the momentum of Kamaru Usman and being under the tutelage of Trevor Whitman for quite some time now. But there's definitely a path where both fights are extremely close, and we're kind of just like, grasping for straws over here, and it's basically even.
Not gonna lie, I did try to go with the triple header of the Trevor Whitman triple header here, putting Gaethje, Rose, and Usman all in the same lineup. It became difficult. Difficult. Pretty much, I had to put Chris Curtis in there. Frankie Edgar was another one. Billy Quarantillo was another one. I mentioned about Billy just because of I had him on my show earlier this week. I spoke to him in the last week, and to me, the two fascinating things that came out of that conversation was we talked about him working with Antonio Tarver, the boxing world champion. Of course, Antonio from living here in the Tampa Bay area, and he worked with Antonio because of the striking ability of Shane Burgos. He wanted to have that look. Of course, the other aspect he talked about is fighting in front of fans again. That is going to play a factor in this matchup. But one thing about Billy can take some damage. But I think the word that I would use in this fight is levels. Shane Burgos has fought a much higher level of competition than Billy has. Now, this may be the start of Billy's rise as this gives him opportunity to get into the top 15. So that was one that kind of stuck out there to me. Ryan asking about is Alex Bahia MVP too chalky on FanDuel? If you're looking to get different from the field on FanDuel in terms of MVP, and look, it is scary to get away from that main event because especially if that thing goes 5 round, it could be a slate breaker. I mean, let's just be honest about it. They can put up such a huge number that if you don't have them in MVP, it doesn't matter what the rest of your lineup looks like. But I think if you want to get different from the field, you look at fighters not named Usman, Covington, Namajunas, Whaley.
Yeah. So, trying to avoid the main event was very, very tough for me to grasp. I was trying to do the math on if this goes the distance and Kamaru Usman doesn't land takedowns and say he doesn't control his opponent against the cage, where in the Tyron Woodley fight, there was so much control because he just pinned him against the cage and hit him with tons of total strikes and all that stuff. So his total was boosted. I was trying to just kind of think of if this is just a striking affair for 25 minutes, is there a way Usman is not optimal? And the more I think of it, the more I still say no. I feel like he's probably optimal just because of the volume. And Colby Covington's work rate is going to bring that out of Kamaru Usman, or we're going to see Kamaru Usman chain some takedowns, which I don't see that happening, but I could see him finishing Colby Covington in a different way. So it's tough. And I know that looking at the Trevor Whitman fighters, you want to get to as many of them as you can because he's such a high caliber coach. Yeah. But I feel like a contrarian approach is only including one of them. And that one of them could be Kamaru Usman and getting a little different on the other side. You talk about Billy Q, kind of circling back. Billy Q of how he has, some takedowns in his back pocket. If he can try that at times, he has good striking. He's working with a good boxing coach because, Burgos' striking is just so phenomenal. I think that people are underestimating Burgos' takedown defense. And this is a very, very, very difficult fight for Billy Q. If he beats Shane Burgos, man, this kid has really turned out a pretty successful early run in the UFC, and I'll be absolutely impressed. But I'm siding with Burgos pretty heavy. I think that he could damage Quarantillo. And given the ownership going to Quarantillo, I would much rather pivot to a guy like Michael Chandler. Like, you know what I mean? That fight screams GPP optimal for me. So that's kind of like my strategy with the Billy Q ownership.
Next up, top 74 or less besides Colby Covington. I know you want to talk about this fighter later in the show, but I feel like this is a perfect time to bring this up. Okay. Someone's 7,400. We haven't talked about this fighter. We've talked about Chris Curtis. I talked a little bit about Frankie Yeager, about the takedown potential if he could do there. But I know you've been doing some deeper dive in this over the past 48 hours. Yeah. And a guy that you're looking at is Bruno Souza.
Yeah. So hear me out. I know it's crazy. And I know the prospect of Bogdasarian, like Melsick, looks amazing. But I did some deeper diving and I ended up coming across a lot of training footage and all that for Souza. Now, I'm only telling you guys this. So it's 450 of you guys. And I hope that this ends up working out in some of our lineups. Don't be extremely aggressive, but hit that like button, get us over 150 likes for this deep dive. Okay. So the reason why I think Souza is interesting, right, is he's a karate specialist under, Lyoto Machida. Uses a lot of footwork on the outside, which can definitely frustrate, aggressive forward moving strikers. But what I like to see is how on Souza's social media, I went back and I went on his coaches and all that. He's been working with Chad George, and Chad George is a pretty successful MMA fighter. But in addition to that, is becoming a great coach, and he's a phenomenal grappler. And Souza's been working a lot on his grappling, a lot on his takedowns. And Souza's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I'm just saying the best way to get a high-level striker out of there is by taking him down. It wouldn't surprise me if Souza, yeah, he missed weight. He didn't really look the best yesterday on the scale, but his body type, he doesn't really look imposing. So I'm not trying to read too much into that. I saw that and I went to edit my lineups. And I said, nah, I'm going to ride this Souza underdog dart throw and just there's a possibility of it coming through. I did it where I'm thinking like, okay, a lot of people are going to be flocking to some, like a guy like Quarantillo. For this guy, Souza, to be 10% owned or less than that, single digit percent owned, I'm okay with giving it a shot.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's an interesting thought process because I mean, look, we both know, the odds are 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 underdogs are going to win today. It's about finding who that underdog, may potentially be in terms of that. A lot of people mentioning worried about Alex Reyes takedown defense. I mean, look, Andreas Michailidis, look, I don't think he's going to. Oh, look, okay. The smart game plan would be go for takedowns. I just don't think he will.
Yeah. So there's a path from Michailidis to, kind of derail the hype train of Pereira. It's by just immediately shooting takedowns and trying to win a boring decision by blanketing his opponent. But when you fight KB Bowler and you're unable to get KB Bowler out of there, I don't know, man. Like I feel like fighting Pereira, who works constantly with Glover Teixeira, leveling up his game, his ground game, his left hook is absolutely phenomenal. It's hard for me to get behind a guy on Michailidis. I'd rather take a shot on Souza. Yeah, like, he hasn't looked good, but he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. He's a champion over in LFA. He's coming over. He looked terrible on the scales. I'm okay with giving him a shot at 7,000. And, I'm not being extremely aggressive with it. I'm not recommending anybody be aggressive with it, but it's definitely in my long shot underdog pool.
Of course, this is the Awesemo MMA live before lock show, and we are sponsored by PrizePicks. They got their daily prop-based contest over there. And of course, you can play tonight's UFC 268 over there. And when you sign up over PrizePicks, be sure to use that promo code Awesemo for an instant first match deposit up to $100. And Pete, I was looking over at some of the things over at PrizePicks today, and one prop really stuck out to me. And that was the Justin Gaethje under 7.5 minutes. I believe the likelihood is that this fight is going to end the first round. Maybe it gets a minute into the second round. I really like that one. That one stuck out to me. Mm-hmm. Another prop over there that I didn't like as much as I liked the Gaethje one, but did stick out to me is when you go over to that takedowns tab and Bobby Green, his number is 1. He shouldn't score a takedown in this fight. Ali Quinta, I believe, even if Bobby does shoot for a takedown, would be able to keep it up on the feet. But that was in the takedown category, one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, so I like the time one on the Gaethje one. I think that one takedown is possible for almost everybody in an MMA fight, just because if you're not expecting it, they can catch you off guard and you can end up getting taken down. But if you look, traditionally, Ali Quinta is pretty strong against, defending takedowns. You even saw that in a Khabib Nurmagomedov fight where he's able to stuff some. So I like what you're thinking there, and I do think that it has value, but like I said, be careful because one takedown is possible. Jason could probably take me down if I'm not expecting it. So
I think I could take you down.
Okay. Well, there's a guy.
I got a lot of weight on you. Okay.
Yeah, but my main training partners are heavyweights as well, so like it's okay. But like, there's a guy in chat talking about.
You would take me lightly, like, oh, this guy can't take me down. All of a sudden, I just pop, get on that leg, just take you right down.
You get the hell out of here. There's a guy in chat saying every week he's going to submit me. Put $1,000 up on it, and I guarantee I submit you under 3 minutes.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah. We can stream that thing live.
100%. Put $1,000 or shut up.
Mentioned a question here from Mason. As a potential sleeper underdog, John Allen. This is a fight I really don't want to get to. Look, I like Dustin Jacoby. I love his fighting style. He's a guy that obviously known for his stand-up abilities. It's more about a price aspect in this. It's just such a premium you got to pay for Dustin Jacoby this week.
I was thinking about that. Dustin Jacoby is the fade for me of the week, not because I don't think he's going to win the fight, just because he's extremely overpriced, and I don't think John Allen's that bad. I think that, Allen could chain some takedowns together because we've seen Jacoby get put on his back. So a decision win is definitely possible for John Allen, who's had a full camp. Not too sure what Jacoby's been up to. He seems like a guy who stays in the gym and always stays ready for opportunities like this, or maybe he was looking forward getting into the cage at a later date. But I still think Jacoby ends up winning.
I will tell you, Dustin Jacoby does two things in his life. He trains, he plays golf.
Oh, really?
He starts at 6. His first training session is at 6 o'clock in the morning. I remember probably the last time I did an interview with him, he joked about the fact of he was running a little late to his 6 a.m. Session. And the USADA rep called him like, "Hey man, we're at the gym here." He's like, "Oh man, I'm running about 10 minutes late. I'll be there about 10 minutes. We can get that drug test hammered out." But yeah, he's literally he goes to the gym first thing in the morning. Usually trains 2 times a day, and but his what he does to kind of get his mind off the fight game is go and play golf.
Yeah, at least he's not hiding under the cage like John Jones. So I'm sure that they were okay with that.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. We know. I know people that know that's true. So
yeah. Last minute on FanDuel, Billy Q, Vergara, or Frankie.
Yikes.
I would rank it Billy, Frankie, Vergara.
I'd probably flip it. I'd probably go, well, not flip it. I'd go Billy, Vergara, Frankie. I'm not big on Frankie this week. I think a decision win's possible. I think he's going to pitter patter from the outside and be a little hesitant.
Thoughts on fading all 3 Trevor Whitman fires? Man, that's a bold call if you do that.
I think at least one comes through, to be honest.
Yeah, you have to imagine at least one comes through.
Yeah.
Someone trying to say, he goes, "I think Usman submits Colby in the 3rd arm triangle, putting that boy to sleep." It would be fascinating to see if this fight hits the ground who truly has the advantage down there. I would think it would have to be Usman just based on his credentials as a collegiate wrestler. But it would be fascinating if the fight did hit the ground.
I got to tell you though, Colby has some fantastic wrestling accolades as well. The submission game, Usman's not much. He's not much of a finisher, and he's kind of found his power late. I don't think a submission win is possible. Well, it's definitely possible, but I don't foresee it happening.
Next up, let's mention a question here: Burgos or Wei Lee? I'd rather go the Shane Burgos route.
Well, it depends on the rest of your lineup. It's tough for me to just pick one of them. I'll probably say Wei Lee.
Someone asking if we're completely fade Edmund Shabazian. That's a no to me. I'm playing Shabazian today. And if you recall on the Thursday show, I picked him to win.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know, man.
Fine. You know what? I'm texting you right after he wins.
I don't really have much exposure to that fight. I don't care who wins. I hope it doesn't result in a finish.
Yeah. See here. Rose or Osborne on FanDuel. I'd rather go the Rose route in terms of that one.
Well, there's no takedowns defended over on FanDuel. I was going to kind of use that to solidify my point for picking Rose. I think the sneaky upside is Osborne. I don't know why people are really just glossing over a guy that they were picking to beat Manel Kopp. And now this guy, Vergara, is the guy that's going to take out Osborne. Could happen. But I just think that recency bias is a real thing, and people get kind of blinded by past results, which is okay. But we kind of want to look at everything in totality. So
definitely prefer going the O'Day Osborne route in the first. I know a couple people have asked that question. For DK late slate, who gets more points, Shabazian or Billy Q? I will say it's Shabazian because I think he's got a higher probability of winning the fight than Billy Q has against Burgos.
I think Billy Q has more volume and takedowns, so I will respectfully disagree.
Gary or Jacoby? I would rather go Ian Gary.
Yeah, Gary. I'm not really getting to Jacoby at all. If you are, that's okay. You'll probably get an 85-point decision. So I think Ian Gary has 100+ upside.
Yeah. Takedown City. Who's throwing them bungalows? Well, who's throwing them bungalows? It's got to be Shane Burgos. I mean, that's one that sticks out to me the most. I mean, if you're not going to see Shane Burgos chain wrestling,
I think it's going to be Gaethje Chandler. Somebody's they're gonna come out swinging. Chandler could end up shooting takedowns, but that fight not being a part of the optimal will completely surprise me.
Next up, Sam checking in. Appreciate you in the super chat. He said his number now 8.5 on finishes.
You can't listen. You cannot change your number. Like
he's 9.5. He was 9.5 on Thursday.
Yeah,
he's getting better though. He's getting better.
What you said? What is it? What is he adjusting? Like, come on.
He's getting better there. He's also asked about core plays for single entry. I mean, look, I think you have to be looking at the main event, co-main event, picking a side you want that one. I prefer to go to Usman and the Namajunas route, but I think when you look at other core plays, I think, I'm looking at Alex Brahea as one of them that I want to get to.
Yeah. So a parlay for me and kind of like core plays in my mind, that's kind of how I view safe parlays would be Ian Gary and Pereira. Yes, they're both expensive, but they are core plays for me. And I view their matchups relatively safe. This is MMA. Upsets can happen, at any time. But those two are core plays for me, and I think the likelihood of them coming through with a victory is like in the 90% range.
Higher upside, Ian Gary or Malesic?
Ian Gary.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one too. Darren Asco said, what about Al Iaquinta? First off, Al has not been active. He's had some injuries that he's dealt with.
Yeah.
I know I was seeing a story earlier today on Twitter that, there was a point where he just never knew if this opportunity was ever going to come again, that he was going to be able to keep his health going out there. By the way, if people did not see the hilarious Dustin Poirier response to Al Iaquinta, that was awesome. Yeah. He said the line was essentially he would never buy a house from Al Iaquinta, taking financial advice from him after, obviously getting the biggest payday of his life against Conor McGregor. But to me, Bobby Green Al Iaquinta is more of a cash games matchup than it is a GPP.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Green has looked excellent of late. You're talking about fights over Rafael Viziev, Thiago Moises. Yes, he was on the losing end of both of them, but you can make an argument that he won some rounds and possibly the fights. He has a tendency of just dropping fights, though, like letting a fight out of his grasp. Like as the fight goes on, he starts playing around. He starts, reinforcing shots by his actions and showing the judges that he got hit by strikes. His antics are somewhat the reason why he loses rounds. If everything was normal, right, and my buddy Al Iaquinta didn't step away from the sport and was kind of actively involved still, I'm picking Al Iaquinta to win. I think the value is incredible for him as an underdog against a guy who's notorious for dropping decisions. But that inactivity does cause me some hesitation in the matchup. Again, for DFS, not really a fight that I got to because I looked at both of them. Yeah, a lot of Bobby Green's DFS value revolves around him getting takedowns. He's pretty sneaky offensively with takedowns. I don't really see that happening against Al Iaquinta. So I view this fight, like you said, either a cash or pass, where it's like, I don't know, that the upside's somewhat limited in my opinion.
Yeah. Of course, if you have any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. We'll get to those as we do go on. Of course, always appreciate, give us a thumbs up. We do appreciate that here. We got about another 20 minutes here left in there. Actually, about 10 minutes left in the show. Of course, NBA deeper dive. I'm just rolling down the clock here more and more.
I mean, how many more minutes?
Look, I'm sitting in a hotel room. The fridge is right over there. I got a beer waiting for me once I get done with this show. I mean, come on. So you kind of know where my mind frame's at.
Yeah, you didn't even have to wait. You could have been popping the beer and talking these fights.
Look, I'm a professional over here. You don't pop the beer until you're done on the microphone.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. It's you can't be popping beer and talking on the microphone. You might say something silly,
unless we're doing like a fight companion or something like that, a watch along.
That would be the one time you could do it. Yes.
Yeah.
Going through some of the questions here that we have not gotten to in terms of that. Yeah, I mean, one thing about Billy Q is Billy Q will take damage. I mean, this is a guy that, and we've seen it in his fights in the UFC. It's one of those things of, and look, in Shane, there's questions with his chin, no doubt about it. I think that if this fight hits the third round, and even if Shane Burgos is up 2-0, and Pete, we talk about this all the time, live betting MMA is a way to go. You might be able to get a great number on Billy Q heading in that third round. Just something to kind of think about there.
Yeah. I won't be live betting that fight because I get what you're saying. Billy Q, as the fight goes on, he seems to get better. Fights that I think could be interesting from live betting. Well, the Phil Hawes, Chris Curtis one really sticks out to me. The Yeah, any fight really, is awesome for live betting. But the Chris Curtis Phil Hawes one, I think, is where we're going to have a ton of leverage and a ton of possibility for coming through.
I was asked about the favorite captain play over FanDuel. It's really tough to not put Usman or Covington in there just because of the amount of points that they have the ability to put up there, especially if you believe that fight's going to go 25 minutes. But we said earlier in our show, if you do want to get different than the field, look for fighters not involved in the title fights.
Yeah, if you want to get different from the field, have 3 or more 7K fighters, 7K or less. That's a lot of salary to leave on the table. And when I see amazing studs like Usman, Gary, Pereira on there, it's tough for me to have that tremendous amount of, salary left over. But it's a way to get extremely different.
And of course, one of the things we want to see after the fights are over tonight is we want to see those winning screenshots. And to get into the Awesemo Hall of Fame, all you got to do is be rocking that Awesemo avatar or your DFS profile. Be in a contest that you finish in the top 3 with over 5 talented contestants. Tweet your wins to @Awesemo HOF. You'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Only 1 free month can be awarded to a user per calendar year. Look, I see some of our Awesemo crew trying to get into that Awesemo Hall of Fame with their winning lineups. Saw Eric Lindquist had a great lineup the other day. Of course, you can see it right there on the screen. That's done to win 100,000, 15,000, 10,000, 7,000, all in the same NBA contest. What an amazing night that he had over there. Also, John Galt getting some wins over there. There you see the winning lineup that Eric had over there coming down in second place. As I recall, I believe he was a point away from taking down the first place there. Statue Left also taking down first place in a GPP as well. Tommy Nation taking out a $20,000 contest in NHL. If you're not paying attention to NHL, you got to check out our NHL strategy show. Those guys do a tremendous job getting you ready. Of course, come up here in just about 10 minutes or so. We'll have NBA Deeper Dive to get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. As of course, I'm watching NBA every night, man. You know me. That's what I'm doing every night.
Bro, I just see that photo of the guys that were photoshopped. I don't know if you saw that. What the heck was that? It kind of threw me for a loop. Did you see it? It was like Laffy and Ben, and they're all photoshopped onto these weird photos. Did you see that?
I did not notice that.
Yeah,
no.
I'm over here trying to like read questions and whatnot, and it just popped up, kind of threw me for a loop. But yeah, we have some great content over here. When you combine the analysts, breakdowns, in addition to all the data and all that stuff that Alex puts out and all the guys behind the scenes put out, I think if you combine the two, it's a recipe for success.
What are we doing to my guy Laffy over here with that photo? What are we doing to him?
Yeah, I didn't know what the heck that was.
Yeah, we told the story last week. Laffy is the reason why we're at Awesemo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. You can't be doing that to our boy.
Man. And I see, the boss man going down to Miami for the world championships.
That is so cool. I retweeted it. If you don't follow us on Twitter @Jason_Floyd, @Pete the Heat MMA. Yeah, it's cool. Like sometimes we'll put out nuggets. You'll see Jason put out his MMA interviews that are extremely helpful leading up to, DFS slates and all that. But yeah, the boss man heading down to Miami for something that is somewhat of a dream for all of us. So definitely supporting our guy.
Better value as a sneaky MVP on FanDuel, Phil Hawes or Ian Gary? I feel Gary's a much safer pick.
Yeah, I mean, if people don't know how good Curtis is, they're probably going to say Phil Hawes.
Yeah.
But I think Ian Gary is just he has so much hype behind him that I do think that it is justified.
Yeah. Let's see here. Any advice, info on the Barnett Vellante fight? Don't trust either one of them.
Yeah, but, close your eyes. Close your eyes. That's the only thing I gotta say.
Vellante, it's his retirement fight. Chris Barnett, you look at his body frame, he's a very athletic dude. Very athletic dude.
Yeah, and I can't say that Gian Vellante is pretty athletic. I know that he's, in the past was athletic, but he's really let himself go. 1 foot out the door, talks about retirement. I would like to see, like, as a fighter's going to retire, you want to see the best and then leave it all out in the octagon. And you could see that even with how his body's looking, but it does not inspire confidence. So I'm going to lean Barnett in the matchup.
I want to try to get some rapid fire before we get out here in about 5 minutes or so. Doing a 20 max, who should I have the most of?
Pereira and Gary. And Usman.
Okay, all right. I was going to throw Usman in there. I would also say Rose Namajunas for me.
Okay.
Volatile fight, but salary. I think it would be very surprising if the winner of that's not optimal.
Okay.
Who would you say is a must play on DraftKings?
All those I just said, any of those two. But the must roster fight, I think, is Gaethje Chandler.
Pereira or Gaethje for a GPP?
The safety is Pereira. Volatility is definitely Gaethje.
Main fights to target over on FanDuel. If we're talking about the pay-per-view, really the only fight on the pay-per-view I'm really not trying to target would be the Vera and Edgar fight. I mean, look, I think potentially Cheeto Vera, when we're talking about a leverage play today, could be that guy because he's in that range of a high-ranging fighter, but no one's really talking about him.
Yeah, I didn't really get too much of him. And a guy that facing an opponent who's just knocked out and has some good sub skills. Maybe he's flying under the radar a little bit. Maybe I'll have to adjust something.
Covington is tremendously undervalued on DFS in Vegas, but I never bet on him. Yeah, look, he's very undervalued here. Iaquinta or Vergara, FanDuel cash.
Cash, I go Iaquinta.
Whaley and Curtis or Shabazian and Souza.
First one.
Let's see here. See my guy Eric checking in on chat. I always appreciate you, Eric, man. Let's see here. Prayer MVP spot on FanDuel. Look, I think that's a good play.
Yes.
I mean, look, the only thing you worry about, even though Andreas is not a takedown guy, but that would be the clear path to victory.
I mean, Mihailidis can get takedowns, and if you're fighting the best kickboxer to cross over into MMA, I would highly suggest you do so. So you could see him panic for takedowns, and that could end up either resulting in some takedowns or resulting in him getting fatigued and knocked out.
Would you stack women's or men's title fights? I would consider in cash, but not in a GPP.
Ooh, it's a good question, Josh. That's my buddy Josh. So would we stack the Usman Covington or Rose Namajunas Weili Zhang? That is a damn good question. I'd probably like the cop-out answer is stack neither, but women's MMA tends to go the distance more than I'll say women's MMA in that one.
Be sure to like and subscribe to Awesemo right here on YouTube. Get all the great tools and content we have available for you, video on demand, live shows as well. Of course, coming up next is NBA Deeper Dive. And of course, we got a range of shows tomorrow morning to get you ready for week 9 of the NFL going on here today. Curtis or Souza on DraftKings. I would rather go the Chris Curtis route for me, but I don't mind going either route.
Yeah, I kind of view them the same. Curtis has more finishing upside, though.
Would you take both Gary and Pereira on DraftKings or just one?
Yeah, I made a group for at least 2 of Usman, Gary, Pereira, and then I've also made groups where I get at least 1 and I kind of mix and match. So you can't go wrong as long as you have one of those guys.
Edgar or Iaquinta DraftKings last spot?
Oh yeah.
I might rather go the Iaquinta route because look, Bobby has a tendency to play to the crowd, and judges don't necessarily, it doesn't work out in his favor a lot. As we mentioned, today marks the 8-year anniversary of the last time Bobby Green won a fight via stoppage.
Yeah, I will say though that Iaquinta is my buddy. Frankie Edgar, if you're comparing those two, I think Frankie Edgar has more upside because of takedowns. So I will say Edgar, even though I'm not on Edgar at all today.
Yeah, that the upside potential definitely sticks out to you there. But that is going to do it for this edition of the Awesemo MMA Live Before Lock Show. Good luck to everyone. Come up here next. You got NBA Deeper Dive as the guys will get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. Of course, that will be followed by NBA Live Before Lock. So hope everyone has a good night. Hope we have some great fights tonight, and we will talk to you coming up here on Thursday for the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Have a good day, everybody.